Are you someone you know battling cancer? Welcome to Integrative Cancer Solutions with Dr. Karlfeldt, where you get to be part of a live consultation with a patient diagnosed with cancer. I was never close to my father. In fact, I found out that he passed away from colon cancer 6 months after he died. I never got to be with him during his struggle. This podcast and the cutting-edge integrative cancer therapies I offer at my center are my chance to do what I didn't get to do for my father. Tune in as I get to know the struggles and victories of my guests while battling cancer. We will discuss natural medicine and how it can safely be integrated into traditional oncology care. You are not alone in your struggle. Dr. McKinney, it's such a pleasure to have you on the show today.
Well, thank you, Michael. It's nice to be here.
According to your view, I know there's a lot of thought as to what cancer truly is. We have our standard model, and we also have the hallmarks of cancer. According to your view as a naturopathic physician, what is cancer?
Well, cancer is a disorder that starts with nutritional changes in the human body and affecting the nutrient-sensing pathways and mitochondria, the little energy production units in every cell, which eventually causes feedback into the nuclear DNA and results in mutations. People have always thought of cancer as starting with mutations in the DNA, but really that's down the line from the early changes in pH and nutrition, particularly high sugar load and low oxygen, high salt intake, which creates a low oxygen environment that causes cells to switch back to a form of growth that they used when we were a little fetus, as a little embryo growing in the womb, just putting on cells without much skill sets in the cells, relatively unspecialized cells. And that pattern of fetal growth in the first trimester just put on a whole mass of cells. And that pattern of relatively uncontrolled growth resumes in the cancer cells. So this is a pattern of growth that human cells begin with. And unfortunately, under certain bad nutrient conditions and too high salt intake, too high meat intake, too much sugar intake, starts to cause the cells to revert back to this uncontrolled growth and overproduction of cells. So it's the overproduction of cells that are unneeded. The adult, every cell in our body is formed in that first trimester and merely grows and specializes from there in later parts of our time in the womb and then our growth. So that cancer is something that a primitive growth pattern that cells revert to out of necessity to stay alive in the unfavorable conditions which we're feeding it.
So in essence, cancer cells just is a way for a cell to survive. It's a basic survival mechanism.
Right. So we force them into this corner where by having our cells low in oxygen and low in good nutrition and control things that support controlling the growth. So it has a lot to do with genetics, but genetics that we inherit from our parents, we get a good set of genes from our parents, and the theory used to be that these would somehow randomly mutated into bad genes, but really we have a lot of genes already in place in our DNA that we inherit that can create this growth pattern, and we simply turn them on because the energy sensing pathways in the cell and then the mitochondria that metabolize the nutrients are not getting what they need to have the adult growth, where a cell simply is replaced when it gets old and by a good new cell, and there's really no change in the number of cells in your eye, in your leg, in your brain, and any part of your body. So we turn on this whole cluster. It's called a fetal growth cassette, when out of necessity in order to deal with this malnutrition that's rampant in our culture.
So in essence, because people, they check their genetic disposition, and we've done all this research on our genes and what might make us more likely to develop like breast cancer, female hormonal cancers. And so in essence, though, if you keep the mitochondria healthy and feed the cell, and the likelihood then of these genes to express would be greatly reduced.
That's right. Yes, it's all about the epigenetics. We have a remarkably simple gene set compared to other animals. I mean, we have much less genes than a corn plant, but we have a remarkably complex set of switches that turn those genes up or down, make them run faster or slower, turn them off entirely. So what happens in cancer is a whole cluster of bad genes, growth-stimulating genes, turn on at the same time as a whole cluster of growth-suppressing genes turn off. There's nothing random really about it. So if you inherit a tendency to have a cancer risk, and perhaps 10-15% of cancers have some sort of genetic component, it's really the epigenetic switches that determine whether you actually get that disease or don't and live out your natural life. So we can influence these epigenetic switches nutritionally, and a lot of the signaling that influences them comes from the mitochondria. So that's been the focus of my work for the last at least 10, 12 years.
And since mitochondria then becomes so important in this process while you're battling cancer, or if you want to take steps to minimize the risk of developing cancer?
Oh, absolutely, both. There was a study in Alberta, University of Alberta, Edmonton, here in Canada, in 2007 that showed you could spark up oxygen burning in the mitochondria and shut down this whole fermentation and metabolic disarray that has caused the cancer. And in fact, if you look at the number of mitochondria and that are lost or damaged and the amount of fermentation going on, there's a linear relationship between the growth rate and the spread and aggressiveness and the deadliness of a cancer. The more the cells ferment, the sicker you are. So discovered that we could actually turn this around. Now, people have tried to do this with oxygen, with alkalizing, and all kinds of strategies since Warburg discovered these grana, were somehow involved, now we know it's mitochondria, were involved in cancer in the 1920s. But it's been almost 100 years since we actually found something that could actually influence them. So now we know that not only can we prevent cancer, we can actually, to some degree, at least many cancers, treat them, slow them down, cure a few cases with mitochondria and epigenetic-based therapies.
What actually, if you have a cancer cell and let's say you get the mitochondria fully functioning, what will happen to that cancer cell?
It heals. So this is the idea of using the body's own innate wisdom and not necessarily having to kill the cancer cell and risk killing a lot of healthy cells and tissues along with it, but actually revert those cells back to normal behavior.
So you actually don't have to go and kill it, radiate it, chemo, go after it with chemo or surgery and all these things. You can actually, in essence, if you turn on the mitochondria within that cell, it can then revert into a normal cell behavior.
That's right. Yeah, it was found, for example, a doctor in Vermont, Schaefer, in many years ago, 20, 25 years ago, found that you could put an aberrant nucleus from a cancer cell that has all this mucked up mutated DNA and put it inside a normal cell where you took out its native nucleus. And you would expect, if the DNA and the chromosomes were running the show causing the cancer, that would then be a cancer cell, but it isn't. And it turns out that if you put a normal nucleus inside a cancer cell, you've taken out all the mutated DNA and put in a good nucleus that doesn't have any problems. It's still a cancer cell because it's the mitochondria out there in the cytoplasm outside the nucleus, outside the chromosomal DNA from your parents, that's actually running the show. But interestingly enough, the whole point of chemotherapy, radiation, a lot of the therapies and some of the natural therapies for cancer is to cause that cell to throw a death switch, to recognize that it's mutated, and you're supposed to be able to shut down mutated cells, recycle them, and get them replaced with good cells. And so it turns out that when you restore oxygen burning, that either the cell heals itself and fixes its mutations, and if it can't fix all those mutations, it shuts itself off and goes away just like you've killed it with chemo or radiation, but without the poisoning of the body.
That's fascinating.
So you get your way whichever way it decides to go. If it's too damaged, it'll shut off. If it's repairable, it will repair.
And what are then some, in order to turn on the mitochondria, what are some strategies? Actually, I know that's going to be a big subject. So what I'd like to do is, we're talking about the mitochondria and the importance of healing the mitochondria in order to either kill the cancer cell or actually made it behave in a normal fashion and become a normal cell. So what are some strategies from a naturopathic point of view to heal the mitochondria?
Good question. So what inspired us to down this road was the discovery of a drug called DCA, dichloroacetate. It's just basically a chlorinated vinegar. And these scientists in Alberta, Canada, reasoned that this might be something that could open up some channels and cause these little combustion chambers. For those who are new to mitochondria, there are about 1,000 of them in every cell, and they generate energy from burning fuel with oxygen. But they can also generate all kinds of supplies to make materials that cells need, the DNA and RNA and all the stuff cells are made of. So the mitochondria, they go wonky in cancer, and I believe they trigger cancer. And these people found some studies indicating it could open up certain channels in the mitochondria that get shut down and make them revert to this cancer lifestyle, and that this would reverse that cancer lifestyle in that cell. And so sure enough, it did. And it was very, very nerve toxic. It was used in rats, and New Scientist then published an article saying new safe drug cures most cancers. Well, it was a drug that had gone off patent. It had been abandoned for use in diabetes because it caused massive nerve damage. And at that point, it had only been tested in breast cancer in rats. So it wasn't really true that it was new safe drug curing most cancers. But people went crazy for it, and we found a lot of people got damaged by it. So that motivated me. By damaged, I mean paralyzed, unable to walk, talk, hold a cup in a wheelchair in about 2 weeks sometimes. Because people had no idea how to dose in humans. They'd only been given to rats up to that point. So circa 2007, 2008, people were doing this. So my response was to hit PubMed and say, is there something that does the same thing? So without boring you with the biochemical details, it turned out that alpha-lipoic acid, a common antioxidant, and vitamin B1, thiamine, do this same function. They open up this pore. They let the cancer revert back to burning oxygen. And so those have been the mainstay. I prescribe DCA and alpha-lipoic acid intravenously. We nebulize them at home for those who can't or don't want to do the drips. At a doctor's office, they can buy a nebulizer and breathe it in like a mist. Now, this is available in Canada. I'm not sure it's available in Idaho or to your American audience. But in the United States, they've used a product that's similar to the alpha-lipoic acid for many years called poly-MVA, or lipoic acid mineral complex. So that's the equivalent in the States to what we're doing up here with the alpha-lipoic acid. But the vitamin B1, anyone can use, of course, and DCA we also use. So we can give some of these things orally. We can give them nebulizing, give them intravenously, depending how aggressive we want to be. And those are the mainstays. But it turns out there's a raft of other things that also can contribute to that. Quercetin from apples and onions is a real interesting one that we've used for cancer for years. And it not only helps you repair the mitochondria, it helps you make new ones. Now, as I mentioned a little earlier, cancer cells lose mitochondria and they become damaged and some become lost. So repairing them is good, but you want to replace some of the ones that are lost too. And the more you replace them, the less actively that cancer grows and less actively it spreads. So quercetin is certainly one of those substances that does that in spades. So that's an important adjunct to the alpha-lipoic acid and B1. And then from there, there's dozens and dozens of other minor players that we're not, that we're still working on, trying to find their place in the whole regime. But acetyl L-carnitine or plain L-carnitine is an example. And
you have like CoQ10. Does that play a role?
Sure, everyone knows CoQ10 is useful for mitochondria, so that is something we often put in the formulas. Good call. And then there are others that we are looking at D-ribose and lots of other mitochondria adjuncts down the line from that list, grapeseed extract and so forth.
So with the DCA being so effective in resuscitating the mitochondria, you're mentioning that
yes, it's very effective.
In rats and what they studied on, the animals they studied on, it
was rats.
Yeah, it was rats. It created then severe neuropathy. And so with the alpha-lipoic acid complex and the vitamin B1, are you then able to mitigate those issues?
Well, remarkably, this is just the most beautiful thing. Alpha-lipoic acid and vitamin B1 thiamine have long been used to treat neuropathy, for example, the nerve damage in diabetes. So it was just spectacular to find here we have something equivalent to DCA in terms of its cancer effect on the mitochondria, but it actually repairs nerve damage. So I published a paper in Integrative Practitioners Journal 2010, November 2010, saying, for God's sake, we're going to use DCA. Let's use alpha-lipoic acid and B1 with it. It'll mitigate the neuropathy. It'll amplify the effect. If neuropathy occurs, we'll stop the DCA, continue the others, and it'll heal the nerve damage. So it's just been, it was just a wonderful discovery, wonderful serendipity that it has that anti-cancer function and yet repairs the DCA damage. So they're very, very complementary and synergistic, those three together.
And these kind of things, I mean, it's always the thought that you either do integrative cancer care or I should say holistic cancer care, or more of the traditional, and that they don't play well together. I mean, what are your thoughts in regards to that?
Oh, I think that's just an absurd idea. They don't play well together. The studies show that people try and become a Google oncologist and treat their cancer themselves tend to live not as long as if they took chemoradiation, what we would call the standard of care medically, the allopathic or standard cancer care. But studies have also shown, and we've got a big research grant as a result of this to carry on this work, show that when trained physicians, integrative physicians, get involved with cancer care, adding to the standard of care, we can typically double the response rate and cut the side effects by a third to a half. So this is a huge part of my work, and I wouldn't want to claim that the mitochondria rescue or any of these other alternative therapies are proven to be better than the standard of care or replace them. But certainly, if people are going to take the standard of care, I love to give them radiation protectants and chemoprotectants and get them through those things. If they have a relapse, they run out of standard options, or for some reason are medically unfit for chemo, this sort of thing, well, certainly I'll step up with these alternatives. But no, integrative care is absolutely the core of our work. It's the most important part of our work, and it's the part that has the best scientific foundation. There's more money spent on complementary therapies than there are on alternative therapies. So we know, for example, curcumin, melatonin, omega-3 oils, berberine strongly protect people from a lot of the harm from radiation therapy while increasing the effectiveness to some degree against the cancer cells. Just absolutely what you want. It's perfect. If you have going through chemotherapy, immune therapies such as mistletoe, low-dose naltrexone, astragalus formulas, reishi and other medical mushrooms, for example, melatonin, vitamin B12, are hugely important in reducing the harm from chemotherapy and increasing the effectiveness. So this is absolutely what I want to do. I always want to tell people that my preference is do the conventional, at least try the conventional therapy with these supports, and if you don't get the results you want, and you have a relapse, or for some reason you have to bail out of those therapies, well, of course, we'll do something for you. But I have had a lot of success with the mitochondria rescue, for example, but there are no big trials on this. It is an unproven remedy at this point. So I want people to understand that they're taking a chance if they go completely alternative, that it's always wise to try the standard of care first, and then the naturopathic options, alternative options, when you can't be taking those therapies, they're no longer working, then we're there to step up and extend your life and improve your quality of life.
That's incredible. You were mentioning, we were talking about how integrative cancer care, how important that is while you're dealing with the traditional, the chemo, the radiation, and how that can mitigate a lot of the negative impact of the traditional care. So, for instance, radiation. I mean, what are some of the core protection? I know you listed a number of different substances that can be used, but for radiation, what are some core components that you can use in regards to radiation?
Yes, berberine is really an important one. It's an extract from various herbs you may know, such as barberry, Oregon grapefruit, golden seal root, etc. And berberine is a natural anti-inflammatory antibiotic and has many, many applications. But it also acts much like the drug metformin, which is used for diabetes. It keeps cancer away from the cancer. It keeps sugar, away from the cancer cell, and also activates certain metabolic pathways that are important in helping the cancer cell shut off and go away. So it turns out the berberine protects the lung, the heart, the bladder, the bowels, etc., from being burnt by radiation, but doesn't spare the cancer cells. So it creates that therapeutic differential, makes the therapy much more effective while at the same time making it safer, which is just brilliant. You can't ask for more. Curcumin which we know comes from turmeric root, is also an anti-inflammatory. Omega-3 fish oils are anti-inflammatory. They reduce burns. They reduce a lot of the damage without sparing the cancer cells. And then melatonin is a very interesting one. Antioxidants generally aren't recommended with radiation, but melatonin adjusts, for example, is people use for sleep at night. They may know it for that purpose. But in taking larger doses, it can help regulate things like the cortisol rhythm from the adrenal glands, which is a stress-released hormone, and that protects cells from dying. Well, cortisol during radiation therapy prevents the cancer cells from being killed by the radiation. So by using melatonin to regulate that adrenal protectant, we can take away one of their defenses and get more of the cancer cells killed. So melatonin, omega-3s, curcumin, berberine are really very much the leading remedies. To some degree, ashwagandha, vitamin A, and other things can be used, but because of the pill count and the cost and the complexity, I generally keep it to those four basics and then add other things if trouble occurs. So usually we keep people out of trouble with that.
That's incredible. And let's say you're doing chemotherapy. I mean, what would be some of your, and I would assume also it would depend a little bit on what kind of chemotherapeutic agent that you're dealing with, but as a general, what would be some good support?
Yeah. Well, the most important are immune therapies. The chemo can never kill the last cancer cell, so you want the immune system to go in and mop up those last cancer cells at the end of the day when there's all these dead cancer cells and healthy cells. The immune system will go in and wipe the slate clean, take it down to bedrock, and start rebuilding. So it's that maintaining immune function is critical. They used to not pay attention to this. People would die of pneumonia and infections during chemo. Now they're more careful of keeping those counts up, but they don't protect the arms of the immune system that finish the job. So in Europe, they discovered mistletoe does this. They've used it for 101 years. We use the Chinese use astragalus-based formulas. There's American formulas like Marrow Plus, for example, and then there's reishi and the other medical mushrooms, Coriolis, turkey tail. There's many of these medical mushrooms that can be used in the Japanese hospitals. They use them as immune support during chemo. And then the low-dose naltrexone is a popular drug that's an off-label drug used for cancer across North America. So I ask people to pick two out of those four immune therapies. And then melatonin, again, helps make sure that the cancer cells are not protected from the chemo. And vitamin B12 and L-glutamine, remarkably useful, but only during chemo because they actually rev up the cancer cell, making more of them cycle, more of them take up the drug, more of them get killed. But you don't want to be doing that outside chemo. So B12 and L-glutamine protect the nerves, protect the gut during chemo, but must only be used during chemo. And those are the generics. Beyond that, I do have to know the specific drugs. And to give you one example, quercetin, I mentioned earlier from apples and onions, strongly poisons a pump that cancer cells use to bail the chemo drug out as quick as it comes in, and is their main protectant against chemo. And that bailing system, that pump system, can be stopped with quercetin, but it doesn't go well with the taxanes, for example, paclitaxel, and so on, the chemo drugs that were derived from you, and a couple of others. So that's where you need someone with expertise to pick out put a finer point on the program.
That's amazing. And you're mentioning things like antioxidants and chemo. You're saying that still the melatonin being an antioxidant, obviously chemo, radiation are oxidative therapies. So how?
Well, a lot of the chemo drugs are, not all of them, Michael, but certainly most of them are. But it turns out with chemo, it's quite a spurious issue. It's quite an important issue with radiation therapy. There's only a few exceptions. But so the rule with radiation is don't use an antioxidant unless it's absolutely proven to be safe and helpful during radiation. And right now that means curcumin and melatonin, period. No other antioxidants. But with chemo, the whole antioxidant issue is quite spurious. It turns out that antioxidants generally help most of the chemo drugs work better. So, and it's a complicated biochemical issue, but bottom line is that actually we can be quite free with antioxidants, but you do have to know what you're doing, and we don't just give them randomly. There are specific ones that help specific chemo drugs, and that's why I wrote my books, to bring forward that kind of detail.
Yeah, I thought it was in your book, Naturopathic Oncology, which is like a desk reference for pretty much every physician that's dealing with naturopathic oncology, or it should be a book that every patient that's dealing with cancer should have and refer back to. But one of the fascinating sections in your book where you're talking about how chemotherapy actually, it stops that cell cycle of the cancer so that it doesn't really complete into apoptosis, and that antioxidants is required for that cell cycle to complete so that there can be more cancer death or cell death.
Yeah. One of the key things is that chemotherapy by oxidation creates a lot of aldehydes. Well, if you get a piece of tissue taken off by your doctor, sent to a lab, they're going to put it in formaldehyde because it essentially freezes the cells from changing. Well, it locks them into the part of the cell cycle they're in. Well, the chemo drugs hit cancer cells at different parts of their life cycle. If you have 2 or 3 drugs, it's because one's going to hit it when it's in the doubling its DNA, one's going to hit it when it's making protein synthesis, another one's going to hit it when it's in rest phase, and you're pretty sure that some of the cells are going to circle past that checkpoint where those drugs can hit them at some point in their care, at one or more doses of that drug. So by reducing the aldehydes with appropriate antioxidants, you actually get more cells cycling, more of them hit those checkpoints where the drug actually gets at them. The analogy I use is like when you're treating worms in the gut, you give a drug, kills the adults, doesn't kill the eggs. You've got to wait for the eggs to hatch out, but before they breed, you hit them with a second dose, and now you've gotten rid of the infestation. You've got to use the drug at the right part of that organism's life cycle, and the same thing with chemo and cancer cells. They have to be at the right part of their life cycle. If you give so much chemo, it freezes them in their life cycle, you're hooped.
So what is your suggestion then? You have a patient dealing with cancer and their medical oncologist says, stay away from antioxidants. Your naturopathic doctor does not know what he's talking about. What is your suggestion to that patient?
Make a complaint to the regulatory college. It's an unprofessional remark. Of course, there are schools that have no course in oncology, and there are naturopathic doctors who are not trained in this. It is, like for MDs, something that you focus in and specialize and learn about through residencies and through experience and through further training. The basic training of NDs does not make them qualified to handle advanced cancer, but we can all contribute, to these supports with chemo and radiation. And certainly more alternative care and nuances. You want someone who's had some extra training. So bottom line is that we all know MDs have very little training in nutrition. They're not naturopathic doctors. They're not generally practitioners in integrative medicine. They know what they know, which is drugs and surgery and radiation, et cetera. And I always acknowledge their competence, but I certainly have my domain where I contribute as part of the team, the natural medicines, the dietetics, psychology, the mind-body healing, and all these wonderful things we integrate and bring forward, exercise regimes that add to not only quality of life, but lifespan. So they have their domain. We have ours. They're not mutually exclusive. There's some overlap, but basically they don't do my job and I don't do theirs, but together we do a much more wonderful job for the patient. And that's what it should be all about is outcomes and what's good for the patient.
I fully agree. We should bring the best of both worlds to make sure that the patient has the best possible outcome. Dr. McKinney, you were talking about how the interaction with the medical oncologist, and if they say you should stay away from antioxidants, and can you describe your relationship with medical oncologists a little bit more while helping patients?
Yes, well, I have a very cordial relationship with most of them because I have put forward the scientific references in my book and in my lectures to support what I say, that these things have some published data and they are rational. And also, the fact that I'm not necessarily immediately steering people away from chemo and radiation, that sort of thing, has made them more friendly. So I get a lot of referrals. I have a very cordial relationship with them. I do correct them sometimes in the reports, or I let them know that I think they've made an outdated remark or that they really should reconsider some of the things they're saying in light of the published evidence. So I try and be kind and compassionate, and we can cure ignorance with knowledge. So I try and be very pleasant and professional to them, and mostly they treat me the same way. I get a lot of referrals, and we work very closely with a number of the oncologists here. So there's only a few holdouts, who believe all of this is witchcraft, and not much you can do with some of those folks except the patients usually can see who's being reasonable and who's trying to act in their interest.
And that's what I love about your book, Naturopathic Oncology, is that it is based upon research, studies, and it is real information, not just something that you thought out at home. It's thousands and thousands of hours of research. And
that's right. Well, I started in cancer research over 40 years ago, so I have put decades of work into this. I practiced 34 years now. So, but the Naturopathic Oncologist Group, ONCAMP, WWONCAMP.org, the group of naturopathic oncologists down in the States and some of them in Canada have been a great help to me. But doctors around the world have shared ideas, shared papers, and so it's allowed us to build up a base of evidence that is able to convince most of the skeptics that we're here, we're playing fair, we're treating people well, we're not doing radical, terribly expensive, harmful things, and we are contributing to better outcomes.
And one of the therapies that you mentioned that I know that you use quite a bit, and also that's almost standard of care in certain parts of Europe while undergoing chemo, is mistletoe. Can you tell me a little bit more, what does mistletoe do, and also what kind of impact does it have on a cancer patient?
Mm-hmm. Well, mistletoe's been used for 101 years. There's about 6,000 publications, 2,000 of them peer-reviewed, and a meta-analysis. So it's a good level of evidence. About 80% of people in Northern Europe, Germany, Switzerland, Belgium, Denmark, etc., going through chemoradiation are given mistletoe. Well, they're all offered. 80% of them take it. So it has been a mainstay of care there. I've used it for 34 years. It's just coming into use in the States. Helixor is now available in the United States. A lot of the doctors are learning to use it. And it's an immune therapy. It gets the immune system to attack and kill the cancer cells. Same time, there is a small effect on DNA repair and a little bit of a direct cell killing effect. So we can use it in very high doses IV, kind of like a chemo drug, but mostly it's just given by injection under the skin of the tummy a couple times a week as an immune therapy. And typically it will extend life significantly and improve and palliate and improve quality of life. So it reduces a lot of the side effects of chemo, the lowered immune counts, nausea, fatigue, etc. But also in long-term care, it will help people live longer. I've had people with a prognosis of a week, 2 weeks, a month, 2 months, who are alive and well several years later, traveling, building homes, golfing, playing with their grandkids, enjoying life, thanks to mistletoe. So it's not a cure-all, but it has about a 50% response rate in advanced cancers, which is better than a lot of drugs out there.
That's incredible. And also another drug that you mentioned is LDN, low-dose naltrexone.
Yes.
That
was discovered about 40 years ago in New York by an American neurologist that he found in giving it to men with AIDS that not only helped their immune counts, which is what he was trying to do, but also helped get rid of some of the cancers, lymphomas and sarcomas. So various people have picked up on this. There's some great websites like LDNResearchTrust.org that have what research there is. It had gone off its patent, so it might be considered unproven, but it has about a 60% response rate, gets the killer cells and lymphocytes to gang up together on the cancer cells. And that's what mistletoe does too. So only those two drugs do those two things together, get the natural killer cells to attack cells that have been marked for death by a certain type of lymphocyte, immune cell. So that's why they kill cancer cells. They get the immune system, instead of nursing and protecting the cancer, they get it to go into attack and kill mode against the cancer, because the immune system wants to help and heal your tissue when it's sick, and its first impulse with cancer is trying to fix it. Well, it just ends up helping it. So with mistletoe and LDN, we get the immune system to turn on the cancer. Okay. And I have a very high success rate. Again, I've got people where the oncologist is saying, I don't know what you're doing, but everyone else that came in when you came in years ago with ovarian cancer, uterine cancer, brain cancer, they're all dead. You're the only one standing. Whatever you're doing, keep doing it. And usually it's LDN.
It is amazing with all the cancer patients that come to my clinic as well, when the medical oncologists compare their vitality, their energy level, and their success rate compared to the rest of the population. They're always amazed when you have somebody that incorporates naturopathic oncology strategies along with their traditional care. I've
had several oncologists tell me these exact words. Neil, I can walk in the chemo room or the radiation room and spot your patients because they're the ones that aren't sick. And I'm very proud of that. And if that's all I ever do for cancer patients, I'll be very, very happy. The alternative medicine stuff is great, but supporting people through the conventional care is where we're going to help more people. And I just think it's awesome what we're able to do.
Yeah, it's just incredible. And that's one of the things that I love in your book also, I know we only have like a minute left and there's so much to talk about in this area, is how you describe the different cancer drivers like mTOR, VEGF, all these different processes that relates to cancer, and then also what kind of natural agents that you can use to help to modulate these responses or these drivers and slow them down.
Yeah, we were chasing after a lot of those in the 80s. We have, there's a lot of them to go after. So we're beginning to see a little deeper into the cancer problem now and home in and make things a little simpler. But that was a very important phase of our work to identify the drivers and what goes up against them. And it gave us a short list of remedies that turn out to influence mitochondria, turn out to influence epigenetics when you look more deeply at them. And that's probably where they do their most important function.
The information in this podcast is for educational purposes only and it's not designed to diagnose or treat any disease. I hope this podcast impacted you as it did me. Please subscribe so that you can be notified when new episodes are released. There's some excellent shows coming up that you do not want to miss. If you're enjoying these podcasts, please take a moment to write a review, and please don't keep this information to yourself. Share them with your family and friends. You never know what piece of information that will transform their lives. For past episodes and powerful information on how to conquer cancer, go to integrativecancersolutions.com. If you would like to know more about the cutting-edge integrative oncology therapies my center offers, please visit thekarlfeldtcenter.com. Thank you for spending this time with us, and I hope to see you at our next episode of Integrative Cancer Solutions with Dr. Karlfeldt.